Today we are going to work on a slouchy texture hat. We are going to do this with our machine and we are going to change the texture between knit and purl. For this project we are going to use our retro stripes from Red Heart, a contrasting color for the brim, and I always use white for the inside. We will also use some weights, a circular needle, scissors, a pick, and a pot lid. Cast your machine like you normally do, and at the end we are going to use one of these tension forks. Place your yarn in the last hole of the tension fork. Make sure that you go slowly on the first row, controlling each stitch. Knit until you have about 15 rows so you can place some weights. Pull the casting string so you can close a little bit the center and place your weights. Make sure that you have enough weights to be able to hold your pot lid in place. Keep knitting until you get until row 20. When we get to row 20, we are going to use some circular needles to pull the stitches out of the machine and change the texture of our knitting. Remove the yarn from the feeder, make sure you close the feeder and start knitting without feeding each one of the needles that is going by. When you get to the center, start picking each one of the stitches that is in front of the two little pegs in front of each needle. For this, we are going to use the circular needle. We pull each stitch at a time and we keep cranking until we get all the stitches from around. When you got all the stitches out of the machine, remove the weights. We are going to start changing the texture of our knit. First, we have to place the peg number 1, or the first black peg, in front of the feeder. Turn your work inside out, leaving the purl in the outside of the tube and the knit in the inside of the tube. We are going to start placing this tube back on the machine, making sure that the knit is facing upwards. Look for your first stitch and pull a little bit, 5 or 6 stitch onto your needle. You're going to use the knitting needle and your pick to help you put each one of these stitches inside of each one of the needles. As you keep going, place 5 or 6 stitches onto your circular needle to make your work a lot easier, and keep placing them until you get all of them. As you get to the end, it's going to start getting a little bit tighter, but it's still pretty simple to get each one of the stitches in the pegs. Place your weights back on, and you're also going to use your pot lid, and pull the yarn of the first peg and put it back on the yarn feeder using your tension fork. We are going to start knitting. Each one of the stitches that you put back on has to go in front of the 2 little pegs and the yarn of the feeder getting caught by each needle. We are going to work on 3 rows that will give you the first accent of the right side of the hat. We will have a wrong side and a right side. So these 3 rows will give you the first part, the first purl of this hat. Every time that you are changing textures, make sure that you control the first row of knitting to make sure that each one of the stitches are catching when you are knitting. Now that we have 3 rows of purl, we are going to do the same that we did before. We are going to remove the yarn from the yarn feeder, start knitting without feeding the needles, and then using our circular needle to remove all the stitches from the machine and turning our work inside out. We have now our first purl accent on the right side of the hat. Turn your work inside out, and we are going to place it back on the machine with the purl facing upwards as it was when we just started the hat. And we are going to knit 6 rows. Place your yarn back on the feeder and don't forget to use your tension fork. Make sure that it goes all the way down between the two front pegs. And you are going to knit 6 rows. When we get to the 6th row, we are going to do the same as before. We are going to remove the yarn from the feeder, go around without catching this yarn, and then removing all the stitches with our circular needle. We have now our first accent of purl and our first knit accent. We are going to repeat the same process, doing 3 rows of purl and 6 rows of knit, back and forth until we get the length, the desired length. For this project, I use a total of 5 sets of purl and knit, with 3 rows of purl and 6 rows of knit, alternating, and at the end, right before the brim. When you get to your desired length, you are going to start working on the brim. I usually do a brim of 15 rows for each side. I also realized that the inside of the hat has to be about 4 rows shorter than the outside to give to it the slouchy vibe. I normally use a different kind of yarn for the brim, but in this case I had enough yarn to do the 30 rows of brim. When I use a different kind, usually go for impeccable. When I finish in this color, when I finish in turquoise, or I use Bernat Premium on this color when the end of my hat is on the pink side of it. And then I always use white for the rest of the hat because I find that the colors pop up a lot better. For this hat, I use a total of 69 rows in white yarn. The total number of rows for the hat is 172, where 88 of these rows are at the front with the texture knitting, and 84 of these rows are the inside of the hat. Remember that this is a slouchy hat, so it is meant to be longer than a regular hat. I find that this texture pattern shrinks a little bit the size of the hat. I would normally use 150 rows to 160 for a slouchy hat with no pattern. So with this having 172, you know that there is a big shrinking in it. We are removing now the hat with a needle, and we are going to cinch the ends. If I compare these two hats, the one on the bottom has 150 rows and the one on the top is the one that I just made. So as you can see, now they have the same length, however, one is like 20 something rows longer. We are going to place a pom, and I like to make them removable. In this case, I'm using the pom with the elastic and using these hair clips. Using a crochet, I am going to pull the elastic through the center. And when I have the elastic, I will place the hair clip in the inside, facing upwards, facing the hat, to avoid it pulling the hair when it's worn. Don't forget to fluff up your pom. I usually do it using a blow dryer, and they look amazing.